Welcome to Inside Equine Minds, a podcast where I, Caitlin Hendry, meet with trainers, riders, and grooms to dive deep inside the minds of the most successful horses in various disciplines. We'll take you behind the scenes from the horse's perspective to learn about how these horses are trained and managed in a way that strengthens their mental game and fuels their success. This podcast is brought to you by EQPI, or Equine Performance Identities, which is a personality profiling tool to help you understand your horse at an individual level. An EQPI profile provides information about your horse's individual needs and motivations so you can manage and work with them in a way that brings out their best. An EQPI profile can also inform breeding and sales by providing information about temperament to ensure the best match possible between either horse and rider or stallion and mare. On today's episode, I'm excited to be meeting with Lainey Ashker, who is a 5-star eventer, dressage queen, all of the things. She's multi-talented, but I'm really excited to talk to her about her gelding, Anthony Patch, better known as Al, who was her 5-star horse a number of years ago. And he is a 1999 thoroughbred. Lainey bought Al as a quote-unquote dangerous 4-year-old, and yet she was still able to get him to that 5-star level. And so I'm really excited to talk with her about how she managed to do that, given the challenges of his personality. Before we dive into speaking with Lainey, let's do a quick overview of Al's EQPI profile. Lainey took the EQPI profile assessment for Al on the EQPI website, which is equineperformanceidentities.com. It's a 5 to 10 minute survey. You basically fill it out and tell me which characteristics you observe and how often, and then using those inputs, I create a profile. The assessment and my profiling measures 4 behavioral traits, which are spectrums of behavior. The 4 spectrums are independence, which is the horse's preference to control or comply; extroversion, which is the horse's preference to interact or isolate; stability, which is the horse's preference for predictability or variety; and lastly, the structure spectrum, which is the horse's preference for clarity or flexibility. By looking at where the horse falls on each spectrum, in addition to how the spectrums relate to each other, that's what gives us that kind of big picture personality profile for the horse. In looking at that independent spectrum, Al is very low independence, which means that he likely relies on others for guidance. He probably doesn't have a lot of self-confidence. He probably gets his confidence more from others and how others are responding, as well as through expertise, because he's also really high on the structure spectrum, which we'll get to. His reliance on others is probably also due to his slightly high extroversion spectrum. It's not really high. It's actually almost even situational, but that probably means he's not going to be a super social horse, but because his extroversion is higher than his independent spectrum, he's still what we call other-oriented. So building a relationship is going to be important, being around other horses or having a person is going to be really important for him, etc. His stability spectrum is situational, and for situational spectrums, there's not really a strong preference one way or another, but we can get a better sense of how it shows up by looking at how it relates to other spectrums in the horse's profile. So for example, Al, his stability spectrum is much lower than his structure spectrum. And when the structure spectrum is so much higher than the stability spectrum, we say that the horse is very careful with rules. So he's going to want to know exactly what is expected of him, what the right answer is. Once you teach him something, he's going to want to do it that way over and over again. And you're probably not going to have to spend a lot of time correcting him for doing something wrong when he knows what the right answer is, because he really wants to be correct. Okay, so his structure spectrum is by far his strongest spectrum, meaning that it's going to influence his behavior the most. He is as high as you can get on the high structure side, so extremely high structure. So he's going to want things to be very black and white. He's going to be very routine and rule oriented. He's probably not going to like doing things that he doesn't know how to do because he wants to mitigate risk, especially because his structure spectrum is much higher than his independent spectrum, which means he's very risk averse. And so doing anything new, or if he doesn't know what the right answer is, that's likely going to make him very nervous, and we'll probably see some spookiness from him as well. If you want to see Al's profile in more detail, it is available on the Patreon for this podcast. Paying members get to see all of the guest horse profiles for free, or if you don't want to be a paying member, you can purchase profiles one-off on the Patreon site as well. Patreon members also get discount codes for XPI services and early access to the podcast content. Now that we all have a basic understanding of Al's XPI personality profile, let's talk to Lainey. Hey, Lainey, thanks for joining me today. I'm really excited to talk with you about Al, and I'd love to start off by hearing about your favorite thing about Al's personality.
Al's personality, he's a horse that is a bit distrusting. So over the course, Al was a 1999 foal. I got him as a 4-year-old, and he is now, what does that make him, like 1999? I can't do the math, 25? I've had him for a long time. And over the course of the years, he has made me feel very special because he definitely knows me over anybody else. And I think it's because that distrusting, like very sensitive mindset, whereas Patrick will take treats from anybody and, he's a total ham. Al is very reserved, and he has to really know you to allow you to, pet him and give him treats. And so I can be gone for a week if I'm away at a horse show and come back, and he always knows and is thrilled to see me. And so that's what my favorite thing is. I feel he makes me feel very special.
Yeah, I was prepping for this and reading like all the old articles, and all of his retirement stuff came up.
Yeah.
And you were always quoted about how he makes you feel like a star, and it's a really special relationship.
I probably had Al a few years too early in my career to really have given him the chance of Olympic medals that he should have, because the horse is still to this day, I probably won't have a horse as nice as he was, and I didn't know any better, and a horse that could really, I got this cool thoroughbred, and I knew it was a good mover. You'd be silly to not know that. And I knew it was a good jumper, but I just didn't have the skill set, in my younger years to merit a horse that was as careful as he is, because it's hard to find a thoroughbred that has all three. That's a good mover that can hold up and then is careful in the show jumping.
So from a personality standpoint, what's the most challenging thing about Al?
Well, that distrusting, right? So he has this standoffish personality that, he likes to have a strict regiment of being fed at the same time, even getting ridden at the same time. He likes his schedule. So introducing new things. One year I spent 3 years at the now 3-star, but it was the 2-star level, because I had a hard time with corners with him. And it was just, him understanding, and not only that, but me understanding his ride to that, because he was a very specific type of horse that liked to be ridden a certain way. He didn't like the bold, ballsy, leave stride out rides. He would rather add the stride because he is so careful.
Yeah.
So that made for training, whereas some horses caught on to things like water and ditches really quickly. I actually think Lottie, my love dance mare, is very similar to Al. She's also has her circle of trust of people that she allows to be around her. And she's the same way with her. It's more ditches, and taking the time and really explaining it to her. And once they learn, that that's what they're supposed to do, then they're great. But everything new to them is kind of like a shock, and they're a little unsure. And that's just been, that has been the most difficult. Al always found the dressage quite easy. He wasn't a nervous type of horse because he really relished off of having other horses around him.
Hmm.
I always joke like he would win the more horses, the more rings in one area, the better, because Al loved being surrounded by horses.
Mm-hmm.
And teaching him flying changes, he was the easiest one because it was I think because it was easy for him. It was more introducing things that wouldn't be in his normal day to day, which, corners or teaching him to jump roundly. That's kind of wasn't in his comfort zone, which I had to just take a really long time to do.
Yeah, I mean, he is really high on the structure spectrum. Like you
Yes.
literally picked every single high structure characteristic and said always. They show up always for every single one. So
Yeah.
like you literally cannot be stronger on the high structure side.
Yes.
And so I keep hearing you say careful, like he'd rather do the ad, he's more risk averse. That's all
Yes.
associated with that high structure. And he's low independence as well. So I'm hearing that when you say he liked being around other horses, doesn't want to be alone because he is slightly high on extroversion too. So he's a more kind of other oriented horse. He likes his schedule, that's all showing up in his profile, I think.
I would always laugh because, when he would go to these 5 stars, he would just be alone. And I always said, Al performed the best. He was a little bit depressed because he had to depend on me and he didn't have his normal friends around him. And he would also be the horse that like within an hour long trailer ride, that horse becomes his new best friend.
Yeah.
He's really, really, I always thought of it as a little insecure around other horses. And I'm like, Al, you were like, one of the best horses in the world, and you have to have a friend with you all the time. But I always liked when he would go alone because he'd have to depend on me a little bit more as his horse. And like probably the worst 5 star for him would have been Burghley, but I really wanted to go, and I knew I had a horse that could do it.
Mm-hmm.
But he wouldn't be the. It's not that he wasn't brave. It was just that because he was very brave, but he just didn't want to be put in a place where he would be hitting a jump. Like
Mm-hmm.
he learned how to brush through brush, but that took a little bit. Where Burghley is such a course, it's such a meaty, beefy course that you've got to have a horse that susses out the flags to just get through them. And bless him, I mean, I got through my first Burghley with him. But if I were to like peg a horse that was like he would be better suited for a Poe or a Lamulin or a Kentucky, whereas Patrick was for sure like a badminton and Burghley, like get out of my way, I'm gonna do this type of
Mm-hmm.
thing,
Yeah,
and it's
probably higher independence, I would
yeah,
imagine, like more confident and
yes, way more confident. And even to the like treats, like he'll just hear treats and I've taught him how to smile. Al would never smile. That's way beneath him. But Patty doesn't care anything for a treat. Like he's smiling and there's no one around him because he wants to get the treat. So it's so funny how different their personalities are. And I think, that being said, with the test, the personalities test, it really does pinpoint the horses so well, and it makes it like, especially if someone that's like me and you're second guessing whether your training methods, maybe this horse isn't going quick enough, or maybe you're pushing the horse too quickly, really understanding their personalities and speaking their language really helps from a trainer standpoint.
for sure. So you've mentioned, there's the trainer aspect and then there's sort of the barn management aspect. And you've mentioned with Al a couple times now, he really needs his schedule. He needs to be fed, even though he's retired, fed at the same time every
Yep.
day and that sort of thing. How else does his personality influence the way that you manage him around the barn, either related to feeding, turnout, who he goes out with, etc.?
Well, so all my horses are an individual turnout, and I'm sure Al would love to have a million horses in his field with him. But they all have large pastures. But in regards to like turnout, like he has the field that's surrounded mostly by horses. He's also on a schedule as far as like if the horses start getting turned out before him, he'll throw a fit. So like
Mhm.
he's the first wave of horses to go out, but he walks with Patty because he can't be out there alone because that would
Mhm.
make him upset. He knows it's time to go out. So sometimes he won't even eat his grain because he's really excited to go out. And then we
Mm.
have to take the grain out to him because it's not about him being ulcery, or he just is really, that's the schedule. And if you're running late, then he's upset that he's not gotten out, and he'll throw his halter. And so he gets walked hand in hand with Patrick so that he's the first to go out, but then he's not alone outside because Patty's got a neighboring field with him. And then
Mhm.
he's as happy as a clam.
Mhm.
So it took him a long time he still will get his fly sheet on because he's also a horse, which is most horses I didn't think they don't really like being blanketed. Al really likes being blanketed. He gets cold easily and he really likes to have his fly sheet on. And when I first retired him, it was like a 67-degree day. There was not a fly out. And so I turned him without a fly sheet on. He loves his fly sheet so much. I bought him one of those fly sheets that have pants. Like he hates flies. And so when I turned him out, it took him like the whole night. Like he was galloping around because something changed. He didn't have his fly sheet on. There were flies around him. I threw a wrench in his schedule. So it's just, and now he's lightened up a little bit, like because if it's a nice day out, I want them to have the sun on their backs. He doesn't need to have the fly sheet on. But back when he was going 5 stars, anything to limit the risk of him running around is what I would do. So but now now he gets the fly sheet if he needs the fly sheet, doesn't, and he's actually okay with it. But it's taken some time.
Does he ask for it? Like if you leave it on the fence, will he walk up and stand by it and be like, "Hey, mom"?
Oh yeah, well if he wants something, he'll take this is the only time that he's really extroverted is he will if he wants to go out and he'll take the halter and he throw it off the stall. He'll take his fly mask and he'll throw it off the stall. He's very good about keeping himself dressed. If he loses his fly mask, the chances are his neighbor took it off of him. Or if you leave the fly sheet on waiting for him to be dressed, he'll throw it off. That's the only time that he would be brave enough to do something like that because that's part of the schedule and you're late.
He's like, here you go. Yeah. Yes. I do wonder also, I do think high structure horses are really sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do wonder if being sensitive to flies and things like that is associated with the high structure as well. Because I do think they're also the more sensitive rides, especially if their structure spectrum is higher than their stability spectrum. If their stability spectrum is higher, they tend to just be calmer in general, kind of more chill horses.
Yeah.
But if he's situational stability, but because his structure is so high, there's a pretty big gap between those two spectrums, which I think is why he's so adamant about having a schedule. Because when the structure spectrum is higher than the stability spectrum, we say that horse is careful with rules.
Yeah.
So wanting to know exactly what the right answer is. Things are black and white. The schedule is this. Don't deviate from the schedule.
Yeah. And funny enough, traveling to horse shows, he was always fine. But think about it: the horse shows, they're surrounded by other horses in the stalls. He never worried about being at the show. He wasn't a horse. I didn't know to give Gastrogard, every time we went. He never had any of that stuff. I started getting Gastrogard, when he was going the 5-star level, but he was very low maintenance, very sound horse. And I do think that that's where his dependence on other horses really helped him get through that because he would very rarely be nervous. I mean, I can count maybe on one hand the amount of dressage tests that he was nervous in. He just was really easy. He was a very spooky horse, very spooky. But, if you could do ring familiarization, the kiss of death for him, if Al could spend every day in the arena, he would. He absolutely hated trail rides. I think there's a lot of unknown there. So I'm not a huge draw rein person, but for my life, because it was at risk, I had to keep him on draw reins anytime, and still to this day, anytime that we go out of the arena, because if he's especially sensitive, he's scared of cattle. So if he hears a cow or smells a cow, he doesn't have any self, he just kind of boils over and will completely flip out, and to the point where he's probably one of the only horses I've ever been afraid on before.
Really?
Because he kind of loses all self-awareness when he's really that scared, but yet he'll run around 5 stars. But I feel there's gallop lanes. He was always worse to ride at the lower levels because there weren't gallop lanes. There were people walking the course, at Kentucky, at Burghley, at all these top, Fair Hill. He never Terry was very brave because I think he had that structure of the gallop lane and not, and he didn't mind about a large crowd. But if there's someone randomly standing next to a fence that shouldn't be there, that he noticed that, and that got his attention. So I always preferred to ride him at the highest level versus a prelim or below, because he was always spooking at everything but the jump.
Were there other things that you did when you rode him or trained him that took his personality into consideration?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I always knew, like, so some horses you have to keep them very, very calm. Like, for instance, when I would go into the final day at show jumping with him, like, Frodo, if Frodo would get tense, then he would like lose his back and start hitting rails. I've had a lot of horses, most horses are that way when they're tense. When Al was tense, he would jump higher, and he had the most unorthodox way of jumping because he would jump like a deer with his head up in the air, but he would also leave
Always
like
clear
5
it.
feet. Yes.
Yeah.
And, so I could kinda get it. I always knew that when I would go into the show jumping, and if he, like he would never rear, but, like, do a little, like, prancy thing, then I was like, "Okay, we're gonna have a clear round," because he's, like, hemped up,
Mhm.
and he rarely did hit rails. I mean, that would make sense why he was so careful, and like I said, in training him I got another good one. So teaching him to use ice boots. The first time I put him in ice boots, I almost lost my life because he jumped up so high that I could see his feet like at my
Oh my
face. So
gosh.
it took me, I would say, a good month. And I started by just putting his feet in like pans,
Mhm.
feed pans, and just the pans. And then I slowly added the water. And then I slowly added ice, and I would do 1 foot at a time. And like after about a month, then he learned to stand in the ice boots. And then we would revert because if he was in the ice boots and he'd fling one over, then he'd freak out. Like, and then, of course, as he was going up the levels, then he got really good. But the ice boots took a really long time. It's a lot of horses, they get it the first try, they're cool with it. Still to this day, Al cannot. So the Equivibe, I'm sponsored by Equivibe, and my horses go on the Equivibe every single day. It's a TheraPlate.
Mhm.
Um, and they'll after they get worked out, they go on there, and they do their thing. Al used to stand on that by himself. I would put him on it and just leave him, and he would ground tie there. But now, because no other horses do that, I've had someone build me like a little stall around it. So you just load the horses on as if you were loading them into a trailer, and then
Mhm.
close it and then leave him, and there's a hay net. He will not get on it.
Mm.
Like, he will not. Now, he's been on it for 10 years, but
Mhm.
now, because that has changed
Mhm.
and he feels a little claustrophobic, he will not get on it. So we just don't do the Equivibe anymore because Al said no. And like that's like there's some things that are non-negotiables for him. And cows and the Equivibe that is like surrounded by boards. He
Mhm.
just it's a non-negotiable. Loading in any trailer, totally fine, but the Equivibe is just a no, no, not gonna happen.
Yeah. Is there anything special you have to do to prepare him for shows?
Not really. He's always been, I always thought, so some horses are better at training. Al did a lot of his best work in the show. He was a showman that way. And not because I think he's a horse that likes the attention. I think he actually gets worried about the attention, but it's because he was a very obedient horse, a
Mhm.
very trained horse. And I think a lot of his obedience was my downfall, in a lot of the cross country runs that we didn't do well because I just didn't give him the right. I wasn't as accurate as I am today
Mm.
or as I was at the end of his career.
Mhm.
So he would be listening so well. Like, he never pulled, like, he was never a horse that I'd be like, oh, he's so strong. Like, never, never pulled. So, he went in a loose ring snaffle with no flash for dressage, a loose ring snaffle for show jumping. And for cross country, he went in a full cheek gag just to help keep him straight for corners. But I wrapped it with like a ton of latex just to soften it, and it just
Mhm.
helped me keep him rounder and helped me keep him straighter. But yeah, he just was it's always was a pleasant experience with him at the shows, unless he had multiple horses with him, and then he would be stressed because if the horses left, he was
Mm.
worried about where the horses went,
Mhm.
you
His
know.
buddies, yeah.
Yeah, but he never, like, I never had to do, like, all these pre-rides to
Mhm.
make
Like
him quieter,
lunging and yeah.
No, like, he wasn't that type of horse. He gave him his job, and he was very happy to do it. The only time he had a not that great of a test at Kentucky, he was 2nd after dressage the year before at Kentucky, and then we had a silly stop on cross country. I rode the coffin not well, and then he had a double clear show jumping, and so the next year I came back and I was slated to do really well. We'd had a great lead up to it. And so I was probably like 3rd to last to go, whereas the year before I was on the first day at the end. So the crowds weren't that, I mean, they were big, but they weren't as
Mhm.
as buzzy as they were. And then they moved the arena that second year. They moved the arena closer to the crowd. So when you were going in at A, there was you'd be about 10 feet from where the grandstand was. And I could tell he was having this like blow up within the warm up because going on Friday, going at the end of the day, because he's not a horse that really thrives on a ton of attention or the clapping, that the noise makes him nervous.
Mm.
And people were really excited. He had such a following. So when I went around the arena, people were cheering, and that made him even more nervous. And I tried to go like this, you know, and
Like,
you don't
shut
want to
up.
be rude. Because
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you don't want to be rude because you love the support,
Yeah.
but the horse isn't appreciating the support. And he was already on edge because there were so many more people just even in the warm up area. You know, looking back now, I probably should have warmed up, you know, near the barns and then maybe just done one round before I went in, because he definitely kind of went inside himself. And then we had a crappy test to put us in the middle of the pack. And all of his best tests would have been on a Thursday. At Burghley, he went on Friday and had a nice test, but it was in the morning. So, and again, the warm up, there weren't a ton of people watching the warm up. There were more around the arena. So, you know, kind of just getting to know what is, and you know, for the cross country and the show jump, it didn't matter because he had the jump in front of him to pay attention. But yeah, that was a tough one on for Kentucky, that next Kentucky, because then he ended up jumping clear, and we would have been in like, you know, super high place if he would have done just what his average test. But you know, woulda, coulda, shoulda. It's always a learning experience.
Yeah. I
So
mean, that's horses, I guess.
horses, yeah, horses.
Yeah, I wonder, I mean, his low independence, I wonder if all the crowds being there, all that energy, if he was kind of interpreting that as conflict or tension. Like there's just so much
For
energy
sure.
and, you know,
He
that.
will read the tension. Yeah, he will read the tension. Like, I mean, he's very weird about new people walking up to him. Like,
Mhm.
he's a very heady horse that way.
I feel like when you think about an eventer, you think about this horse that's really brave and maybe a little strong. And it doesn't sound like Al was those things most of the time, but he was your most
Yeah,
successful horse so far. So
yeah.
how were you able to work with him in a way that got him to those levels?
Like I said, he was a horse that is very funny. Like, did never cared about a water tray on the ground. Like, so spooky, but given his job, he was obedient. And so like I said before with the cross country, like he wasn't a Patrick where like you could put a monkey on the back and the horse would go and do it. Like,
Hmm.
you know, I've fallen off before Patty, and he literally went and jumped 2 more cross country jumps without me
He's like,
on him.
bye, mom. Yeah.
Yeah, but Al would be one that if I fell off of him, he'd either stand next to me or he would run back to the horses.
Mm,
And I didn't realize the quality of horse that I had when I had him, because I'd always been on really brave, bold horses. And Al was my first top level horse that like I said, it's not that he wasn't brave because he would jump I mean, he's jumped the biggest ditches and walls in the world, you know,
hmm.
going early into Kentucky. But he if you rode him in a way that he would hit it, he was very self-preserving, I guess.
Hmm.
That's probably a better word of saying it. He was very self-preserving. So if I would never get hurt on that horse. I never broke a single bone on that horse. So if it were going to be even to the point where there was one Kentucky where he misread a corner and went to land early and was so wide that he opened his front legs, but he dropped his shoulder. And I stood no chance of staying on. And he jumped me afterwards so that he wouldn't hit me. Like, very self-preserving horse in that aspect. So, you know, that was like I said, I didn't have the accuracy. Like, if I had the horse now after making all the mistakes that I made on him, I think he would have been a horse that would, you know, be a world beater. But, you know, like I said, I took the chance on him from a young age and brought him up the levels, and we had a lot of success
Yeah, you did still.
throughout
So.
the levels. Yeah, you know, we had a lot of success throughout the levels. There would be, you know, a couple 5 stars where one stop here, one stop there, and it was just because I didn't have the accuracy at that level consistently enough. And, you know, listen, I'm grateful for him because, you know, as we age in this sport, and we're one of the only Olympic sports that you can have a little more years on you and you actually can improve and compete against the young guns. So as I've aged and my own bravery has turned into more of an accuracy,
Hmm.
it's made me a better pilot for my horses, like the careful ones like Lottie. You know, it's always fun to ride a horse like Patty that will jump anything from anywhere.
Hmm.
But I'm grateful for Al in, you know, looking back, I wasn't grateful then when I would have a stop and lost second place at Kentucky, but I wasn't good enough. And, and when I fixed it, the horse jumped it. He rewarded me every time I was good enough.
Yeah, he
So
just
I
like
knew that,
demanded the
yeah, he wanted accuracy. He wanted accuracy. And I think at that level, you have to have a horse that has, that's why I think Burghley and Badminton probably weren't the best courses for him. Whereas Kentucky, the where maybe the distances aren't related and the horses have to learn how to find a fifth leg, that wouldn't be his type of course. He was more of an accurate, I need a plan. We start with a plan, technical. And that's the beauty. That's why we have all these 5 stars in the world now. And now we can, it's not like this is the only one you can go to. And so he taught me a lot about that. And at the time, like I said, I had never been to Burghley. Didn't even go to watch. This was my first time riding it. And I wanted to go with a horse that I knew for sure had the scope to do it, because they have to have scope. And so, where we had our stop was, again, an accuracy question. And it was the smallest jump on the darn course. But I learned so much throughout just that one course and that one experience in becoming that caliber of a rider, on a horse that has always been that quality and that caliber. Like I said, I just didn't quite have the honed talent at that point for what he demanded. There's lots of horses that would do it no matter what, but Al was probably the best horse for me to have after my accident with Frodo, because he really demanded me to be more accurate. And that before I'd gone, I'd ridden my horses gutsy and ballsy and forward, would get the distance most of the time, but he wanted it all of the time. And it just made me a better rider. And that's kind of what I've turned into today. And I still have, a miss, that we all do, but the level of accuracy that I've learned, in a result of having success on Al, has been a game changer for me.
Do you know much about his breeding? I was looking a little bit earlier. I saw he was bred in New Jersey. His sire's Castle Guard.
Yep. And Amy Alexis.
Yeah, Amy Alexis. Yeah. How do you feel like his breeding has affected his temperament at all? Kind of going back to the question of nature versus nurture. What's your experience with that? What's your perspective?
So when Al was young, I got Al's a 4-year-old. I got Al because he was deemed dangerous. And the people that sold him to me got him from a gal who had him for 3 days. She got him off the meat truck, because he was going to slaughter West Virginia racetrack. Paul and Lauren Jaden called me and said, we've got this horse. It's got talent, but it's crazy. We will not ride it. So I went to see him. He lost 2 shoes on the lunge line, 2 shoes while they were showing him to me. They would not even get on him.
Because he was spooky? Like what? Why did they deem him dangerous?
Well, so Paul got hurt on him. I think he broke his leg because the horse flipped over backwards. And I thought, was he girthy? Yeah, he wasn't girthy. And my mom went with me. I mean, I saw the horse move. I saw one movement. I said, that's my horse. And then I jumped him over these little barrels, and he jumped like crazy over. I was like, this is an incredible horse. I come to find out, when we picked him up, we got him home, and I was like, I'm going to ride him 3 times a day. I'm going to train this horse. And he was a totally different horse. So when I went to UVA, it was my first or second year at UVA, I took him on a trail ride, and I go in a field of cows, and he immediately flipped over backwards. Like he saw it, he stopped, and his first thing, all of his self-preservation that I have known him to have, went out the door when he saw cattle. Literally flip, done. He was so scared stiff that he didn't go anywhere because we were way far away from the farm. So I got back on him, and I was shaken, but I was pissed. So I canter him, and he takes off blindly. I mean, we jumped a barbed wire fence. We went through cattle because he was so scared.
Yikes.
So when I went back and thought about where he was surrounded at Lauren and Paul's, they were surrounded by cattle. Like their whole farm was surrounded by cattle. And so going back, this is a long answer to your breeding question. I called his trainer, who I still am in touch with, his breeder, Tom Swales. And I said to Tom, has he ever been around cattle? Like, what? He said no. And so Al I was in England doing the Olympic test event with him, and he jumped out of his pasture when he saw cattle and sheep, like, I'm not kidding you, miles away, but he heard them, and he just picked up a canter and jumped clear, wouldn't touch it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, we're in a foreign country, and the horse is down the road. But a lot of his misunderstanding, and Lauren and Paul still think I'm like this like messiah of trainers, and I'm like, I'm really not. I'm
Yeah.
really not that good of a rider.
We just don't encounter
I
cattle.
I and you know what? Because they were like, "Oh, you should put a cow next to him." I was like, "You know what? No," because he will. I have seen him in that point where everything is lost. He's blind.
He
He
just
can't handle it.
panics. Yeah.
And you know what? What's the point? There's no cattle in our shows, so
Yeah.
he will always he has his cow dar on. Even to this day, we've got you can't see the cows, but there are cows probably about like 5 miles away, and at feeding time, if you can hear them move, he will stand and he will not eat and he will look in the distance. And I just, you know what? He just is never going to go near cows. But I will say with his breeding, it's sad because the stallion died shortly after he was born.
Hmm.
Because and I've had a few people, one or two, reach out to me that had Castle Guard get, and they're all plain bays, really kind of light, sweepy movement. I totally, I think he ran like 8 times, and the highest he placed was third. And I was like, Al would never break away from the crowd. He could run all day long, and he was fast as anything. But
In the
Al's
middle of the
not going
pack.
anywhere from the horses. He wants to be with the horses,
Yeah,
right? Like he
yeah,
doesn't want to be in the back. He doesn't want to be in the front. So I
yeah,
was like, yeah, he was never going to be a racehorse.
yeah.
So.
I saw he only won $815. So
850 kilos, yeah. But he's one of the soundest horses I've ever had, and by far out of any horse I've ever had, the toughest. He's the toughest horse, which again doesn't suit for
toughest, like,
like his first 2 star, then 1 star. We were in Florida, and he always would grab his heels. He had so short coupled, so short back, but long legged. I had to wear bell boots on him, and we were cross country schooling or something, and he ripped open his heel. Like it was flapping off, and I was like, this
yikes.
was like right before we got to jog the next day and the vet said, I don't know if you're going to make it through. And so I just cleaned it, and they did a glue on it, and that horse never took a lame step. I mean, he's just a tough, tough guy. And it's funny because he likes his blanket, he likes to be groomed, but
Yeah.
he will walk over a bed of nails burning and would still be
He was
sound. He
fine. Yeah.
just always showed up for the job. And all the strongest backed horse I've ever had. He never in his life had chiro done on him. He would get massages, but never in a day I can remember he was ever sore in his back. Yeah, just a really, really interesting, very interesting personality with Al that has been, it took a lot for someone that was moving up in the ropes of eventing, learning how to train something of that high structure and high quality. In my line of work and all the horses that I've ridden, I've not had many that are like him in how he's really tough, he's really resilient, he's very careful, he's brave, but you have to be accurate, super sensitive. Like all of these same traits are really hard to find in one other horse. And so where people may have an issue with training their horse or may think that horse hasn't got the right job for the 5 star level, it might just need someone else's help to get
Mm-hmm.
there. I always found that my top horses, they're quirky. They're quirky. And that's exactly what he is. He's super quirky. And those quirks, when channeled in the right direction, end up being, world-class horses. So my biggest piece of advice to people is to just stay patient with yourself, and stay patient with the horse. And if you need, they're better horses that are in programs. He made my career, and I'm glad that I did take that extra time, making those mistakes with him, and that he was patient enough for me to make those mistakes, and that I didn't sell him for loads of money, because no one else really understood the process of, being flipped over backwards because he saw cows, or teaching him to go in ice boots for a freaking month,
Yeah.
and it made for our relationship as one that people could identify with. They get this horse off the track, and you bring them up from the track to the 5 star level. That's, I think, what gained us so much popularity. It wasn't so much that we had success, and that's all great, but I think it was identifiable for, we all have this little horse crazy barn girl in our hearts, even to this
Mm-hmm.
day. I just go into the barn today just to meet my new horse and to pet him and give him treats, and this is why we do it. And that, doing stuff like that, I guarantee will make the horse want to do for you versus showing up and just riding them.
Right.
Right? The time put in and the relationship created, and I don't care what sport it is. It matters in eventing because eventing is very much a sport of trust, with the cross and with the unknown. but it really matters in any sport that you do, is the horse has to like and has to trust the person that's on his back.
Yeah.
And I credit all of my success to having the relationship that I've had with my horses. They want to go for me because they know the person that's on their back. You know, when I go to the shows, I'm the one wrapping their legs. I'm the one hand walking them, and that quality time, if you have to pick one or the other, will trump training any day, if the horse trusts you. So that's my biggest piece of advice, especially for a horse with the personality traits that Al has. Usually those are the ones that give you the most anyhow. So yeah, that's my 2 cents about it.
Yeah,
so.
it's very rewarding because with those horses, you have to really earn it.
You do.
You don't just give it away. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
If you want to know your horse's profile, you can get a profile at the EQPI website, which is www.equineperformanceidentities.com. If you like this podcast, we'd really appreciate if you showed us some love by giving us a rating on whatever listening platform you use. And if you know anyone who would like this particular episode, please share this episode with them as well. Thanks for listening, and we hope you tune in next time.